Welcome to Glass Houses. At the WACO 2024 event, we had a special guest speaker, Dave Franco, who kindly shared his memories in collecting killifish in Uruguay. Until further ado, let's get down to it.
All right, so thanks again, WACO, for inviting us. Some of my friends have done some presentations in the last couple of years, like Greg Lachowski and Tony Pennell, etc., Mark Labdy last year, so I really look forward to this opportunity to share one of my trips. I was collecting in Uruguay. It was about 15, 18 years ago, and I actually made two successful trips. The first trip was predominantly, I would say 90-95% killifish. The second trip was pretty much 50-50 killifish and cichlids. And we'll get into it here. Uruguay's a wonderful country. I'm not sure why it did that.
You got to go to slideshow.
Let's see if we can get this started.
Yeah.
All right. Whoopsie. So this is actually what started the whole interest in South American fishes, and in particular what we know as Australorhynchus, or they divided that recently nomenclaturally. But when I got this fish, it was, I think, 1980, 81, give or take a little bit. It came in through our Rochester area killie group. This is Australorhynchus, at that time Sinolebus alexandri. And it came, I believe, from Lenny McCoyak to Dan Nielsen to Frank Chermak, who was a good friend that lived in Syracuse. And I was a graduate student at that time, traveling about an hour from Utica to Syracuse. And Frank lived in Syracuse. Frank had a stroke, he was debilitated. But I would stop by his house sometimes and spend an hour or two, drinking a little coffee and talking about fish. And the one day I stopped in, Frank had these in a tank, and they were over peat, they were dancing, they were displaying, and I had never seen anything like this before. So I really was hopeful to get them, and Frank luckily had some success. I was able to get a pair and did pretty well with them. About that same point in time, there was a gentleman by the name of Eduardo Susena. I don't know if any of you old-timers remember Eduardo Susena listing killifish and what was it at that time? The Fish and Egg listing in the BNL before it was electronic. And he'd list 3 or 4 different Australorhynchus. What happened is I started exchanging. Of course, everything was done by letters back then. You can see the date, May 28, 1982. And he'd get some 2 or 3 epiceniums for me. He would send me some Australorhynchus or Sinolebus eggs at that time. I had the ability to get some species that just were not around at that point in time. If you take a look here, we're looking at Bellati, Viarius, et cetera. And back then, the only thing that was around I think it was pretty much Micropennus, maybe a few Bellatii. So by virtue of our letters and our exchanges, I was able to get eggs of probably 14, 15 different species or locations, which was unheard of at that time. And Eduardo and his wife were medical students. He ended up eventually finishing his medical degree and ended up in Spain. He was friends with Malabras, which is sort of interesting. Unfortunately, Eduardo's passed away some years ago. But that whole relationship, which started with the exchange of those letters, led to this, which was a location map. And this was sent to me again by Eduardo, and this is old tape holding it together. But he identified these locations. And holy smokes, if I ever get the chance to get down there, and as an old girlfriend used to say, scoop fish, that's where I wanted to go. Now this is either me doing a talk in Oakland in 1983 or Howard Stern. We're not entirely sure. There does seem to be a little resemblance there. So I had gotten fair because I had so much success with these Sinolebus at that time that I really can't take credit for it. Eduardo was sending me the eggs, and I just did an okay job hatching them. They invited me to speak at that convention. This is a slippery slope. When I started putting this talk together, I took a look at some of the nomenclature, and there's been some significant changes. And we looked at Sinolebus in 1876. That pretty much held through to 2006 when we ended up with Australorhynchus and then Costa in 2008, et cetera, et cetera. And it says here in this study, if you look, there's a myriad of, they've been broken out into a myriad of different species now. And it's always tough when you put something like this together. Which direction should I head in? Who's going to be here? So we talk about the science and the background and, you know, the synonymy or the nomenclature or zootaxonomy. And I thought about it and I said, you know, if I do get involved with this, and in particular this nomenclature here, which was, I think, Philippe Alonso in July of 2023, this was published. I figured I'd turn my back, and after 15 minutes, there'd be nobody left in the room. So, instead of that, we're going to take a little travel log. I'm glad you're all here. I'm going to get my thrills vicariously by reliving my trip, and I'm going to take you all along on the trip with me, if that works. Here's where we're at right now in regard to the nomenclature. And that's it for nomenclature. From now on, it's all going to be just Australorhynchus, which is what it was when I collected them. I strongly encourage this. When I went to Uruguay, I went to a passport health at the university near me. It was suggested by a young lady I was dating at the time who happened to be a nurse, and said, you know, Dave, you should really make sure you're up to date on whatever you need to be for this trip. And I'm sort of thankful for it because subsequently I went to Asia, Indonesia, and a few other countries, and there's things I needed for that trip. Why aren't you looking? There we go. So you go here, you pay a few bucks, they give you some pills, they stick you with a bunch of needles, they pat you in the back and push you on your way, but you know you're good to go. This is it, packed and ready to go. I grabbed a duffel bag with a styro that fit in it. Come on, you. Duffel bag with a styro that fit in it. Collecting net. Sort of wanted to go incognito, if that makes sense. You know, it's always a good idea coming back from some of these countries with a lot of fish. So, you know, ready to rock and roll, all set, and still have that bag. I actually filled it full of fish today and brought it. So what precipitated this whole situation, my ability to get into Uruguay, was some years ago, Thomas Litz from Germany was in the U.S. and did a presentation for the group in Pennsylvania. And by virtue of that, Thomas Litz mentioned how there was a group in Uruguay that was giving tours on Uruguay and collecting Australorhynchus. And a couple of those individuals were Heber Salvia. I don't know if anybody remembers, for some years, there was a listing of Australorhynchus or Cynolepis eggs in the BNL by Heber Salvia. So he was the gentleman that was doing part of this sort of guided tour. So a couple of guys in Pennsylvania jumped on board, got in touch with Heber and the individuals that were providing the tour at that time, and said, hey, you know, can we do this? Boom, they were all set up, and then at the last moment I got a call and somebody said, Dave, you know, would you like to do this? And based on my experience and you know, with the Alexandrine, a thing I talked about before, I really couldn't wait to get there. So it wasn't a matter of if I was going, it was when. Obviously, we've got Uruguay, which is the central south part of South America here. Here's a little map of Uruguay, Montevideo being the capital. You can see the waterways, etc. And Uruguay's an interesting country. It's about 3.4 million people, and out of that 3.4 million people, 2 million live in Montevideo. So you're looking at a country that's the size of Wisconsin, actually, and you know, so you've got a lot of heavy-duty population around Montevideo, and not much else happening in the rest of the country except for a lot of cows. Their number one export is beef, and I think they do about $2.5 billion worth of export of beef a year, which is 20% of their national export. But I can tell you, based on experience, not all the good cow parts stay in Uruguay. Usual, get on the plane, head out. I never thought about it when I left. I was so anxious to go. We flew out of Baltimore. And I figured, you know, be here in South America, not that far away, 5-6 hours. No, it's like an 11 or 12 hour flight. You know, I got a little skinny butt and there's not a lot of padding back here, so by the time I had 8 or 10 hours under my belt, it was getting to be a pretty long trip. So, and that was the first trip. Second trip, we took a different airline, and that was an experience. It was a lot less expensive. It was one of the South American sort of no-name airlines. We got on, and I believe that was Baltimore as well. It was pretty much a direct flight to Argentina, and then we're going to take a little puddle jumper over to Uruguay. Well, the second trip was a little interesting because we get over Bolivia, and we hit a remarkable amount of turbulence. And I mean, this plane is going boom, 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 boom. All of a sudden, the pilots on the loudspeaker, and of course, they 3 languages: Brazil's Portuguese, Uruguay Spanish, and the American, U.S. English. So, blump, 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 I don't understand Portuguese. Blump, 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 I don't understand much Spanish. But after that, those two, turbulence, et cetera, there's people are breaking out rosaries. I'm not thinking this is too good. Well, the pilot gets on there and says, listen, we've got a couple lights on the dashboard or whatever they got on the plane, and we've been cleared to make an emergency landing in Bolivia. I'm like, oh crap. I never should have skipped those Sunday school lessons. I could have used some of those prayers at that juncture. So boom, we start heading down, drop down 20,000 feet, whatever. The plane's vibrating. All of a sudden, the pilot gets back on. I mean, just crazy turbulence. Gets back on and says, this is the English part, since I don't do Spanish or Portuguese. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that turbulence has cleared up some of these flights. We're going to continue on. So I can get a warm, fuzzy feeling about that whole experience. So we get to Uruguay. We've only had there was only 2 minor hiccups in Uruguay regarding the population of people or experience, whatever. The first was when we got off the plane. There had to be 100 little kids, all 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, that all want to carry your luggage. So, we're literally surrounded. And we're like, we're supposed to meet Heber and Pablo, etc. We don't know what to do because we can't move. All of a sudden, boom, Heber and Pablo show up. It's like the crowd dissipates. They give them a couple pesos, and we got picked up, and we're brought to the Ambassador, which is sort of our main hotel, if you will, while we were in Uruguay. It helped that Pablo's uncle was a manager, so I think that's how we ended up there. And it was a nice place. It was a nice hotel in downtown. This is the van. Whoops, again. This is the van that we rode around in and for the majority of the trip, for all of the trip actually. And I will tell you that if you're in a van like that with 4 or 5 or 6 other guys, the trip encompassed about 3,000 miles, 5,000 kilometers, all squeezed in about 9.5 days. So you better like who you're traveling with. It's one of those. I was thinking about bringing one of those T-shirts that said, "I'm sorry about the nasty things I said when I was hungry." This is El Fogon restaurant. Great. I'm hoping not offending any vegetarians, but you're eating a lot of beef when you're in Uruguay. They're famous for their asado, which is barbecued beef. So we'd end up in this restaurant, and we ended up here to plan the trip. So we're picked up, we're getting ready to rock and roll. We're in this restaurant that evening. We're leaving to head out. And these guys are masters. This is, the grill is called the Parisian, and the food is asado. And these guys, a little salt, a little pepper, the grill, and they control the grill, the height, the temperature, up, down, whatever. That's eucalyptus wood burning in the bottom, coals go down, cook the food, and some of the best beef I've ever had in my life. Not marinated in anything, just salt and pepper. These guys know what they're doing. This is interesting in the sense that when I went to Uruguay the first time, and I don't know what other people's perceptions are of annual fishes, but I always thought it was sort of what I would call a bathtub mentality. You go and there's a depression, it rains, we're familiar with annual fishes, they hatch, blah, 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 it goes on, they dry up, they do it again. Well, the bathtub thing really, when you're physically there, you realize that's not the process. what you really find is that you've got these basins, the drainage basins, that, based on the amount of water in these drainage basins and flooding and water movement, it's really what determines not just the lifestyle or life of the annual fishes, but what species are there in the actual speciation. So the different colors represent different obviously basins. And if you look at the Uruguay map as a whole, the different colors represent different basins. So you can pretty much figure that in those different basins, you're probably going to have some different fish. Obviously, the map in Uruguay has all those little dots on it. Well, this was a beautiful map that was given me by Alan Johnson, who was one of the gentlemen on our trip. And it's a great big map, and I didn't want to put X's and O's all over it. So I had to find 34 dimes to put on our collection site. So each one of those little silver spots is a collection site. And our trip consists of 3 different legs. The first leg, we went up toward the center, which was right here. We started in Montevideo, went up and did a collection all up in here. Second trip was to the west. We went up here, collected all through here. And the third trip was all here in Milo, etc. Part of kind of all these different basins. All right, we're up the next morning. We're getting ready to rock and roll. And the first trip was, I think it was 6 or 7 hour ride. So, you're antsy pants, you got in, you're ready to rock and roll. You want to be, as the girlfriend said, scooping those fish. And this lake was just fantastic. You get up in the morning, you grab breakfast, off you go. You learn very quickly that this breakfast consists of sort of a continental breakfast. You get a few croissants, you get a few cold cuts, and you get a couple other odds and ends, some bread. The reason it's important is after the first day, you realize that the Uruguayans are not great on lunch. So you tend to bundle some stuff up and smuggle it onto the van, because your lunch in itself consisted of a bag of empanadas that they would pass around. So you'd have maybe 8 or 10 empanadas in there. You'd have 5 or 6 guys. It's like, who gets the last empanada? And they were okay, but just okay. Thank God for hot sauce. This is the group. This is a motley looking crew. And the reason I can say it's a motley looking crew, I'm not in that picture. This is Pablo Lorino. He was part of the Uruguayan killifish group, the one that organized this trip. He was the key to the whole trip, if you will. Just a wonderful person, and also bilingual. Perfect English, perfect Spanish. So he was our interpreter, etc. And he is actually he's a professor of architecture at the university. You've got Dave Carant with a PhD degree in chemistry and worked for the Department of Department of Defense. Lee Harper, just a wonderful guy. Lee was also a PhD and had a job for years with DuPont, formulating a lot of their paints. Alan Johnson, PhD geologist, who was very helpful in the trip, obviously with our drainage basins, etc. This is Jorge Sylvia, who's Heber's brother, and he actually owned the van and had a tourist company, so he was well versed in handling guys like us. This is Big Lou Pochettino, who was an aeronautical engineer, pretty fascinating guy. And then this was Heber Sylvia, and Heber was a professional soccer player, quite well known, pretty famous, and was retired at this juncture. But you can tell he sort of had an affinity for Lou. This is what makes things go in Uruguay. Anybody heard of yerba mate? Yeah, it's their go-go juice. It's our coffee or whatever. So this is their first trip. We're heading out, and I never heard of this stuff. So they've all got thermoses tucked under their arms. They've got these gourds. They've got the straw they call bambisha, and they're all putting this green, it's looked and smelled like green grass in this cup, wetting it down, and they're going to town on it. So we thought it sounded interesting. And again, this is seemed to make them happy. And it's before cannabis was legalized in Uruguay, although Uruguay does have the distinction of being the first country in the world that had actually legalized cannabis. So we tried it once. I'm sitting in a van with Lou, and we've been on a van for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. He finally asked Heber, can we try some of this stuff? And he goes, yeah, here, tops it off, passes it to Lou. Lou goes, here, try this, Dave. So I try it, and drink a punch, whatever, not much. Give it back to Heber. Lou goes, top it off again. Well, we did it about 2 or 3 times. And then after about a half hour, Lou sits back and he looks at me and just sort of smiles and says, Dave, you feeling that? I'm like, I don't really know how to respond. It's like, maybe it's like Bill Clinton, but maybe they did inhale. Who knows? This is it. This is our modus operandi. This is the way we roll. We got the van. We stuff a bunch of guys in there. We stuff a bunch of killies in the trailer in the back, and off you go collecting. First sight. This is really fond memories. You pull up, you have no sense, or I should say, I have no sense of what it was going to be like in Uruguay collecting. And of course, I dreamt about it for 40 years, so I'm ready to rock and roll. Now again, Uruguay being so far south of the equator, is our seasons are flipped. We went in July, so we're wearing long underwear, chest waders, so sometimes jackets, because it's chilly there. So you throw in the chest waders, you hustle out there, and boom, this was our first collection site right here. There's a close-up of the site. And I can honestly say I think this is sort of what I expected. I think it was pretty cool. It was out of ways. We traveled 6 or 7 hours to get there. I'm like, okay, this will work. There's a close-up. So we jump in there, we're scooping fishes, and hopefully it was pretty easy to collect them. You hear these stories about how, whether it's Cameroon or... Yeah.
What's the temperature, Dave?
The temperature this day was 52 degrees. The water temperature was 49. Almost zero total dissolved solids. There's some other information I'll share with you as we get on here. What I actually did was I kept a fairly extensive log, and I'm happy I did because we'll talk about that in a second. So, if you scoop along the reeds and stuff, you get the most fish. And there was 3 species in this one. There was Santopoecilis melanitania. It was, I was going to say Sinolibius. Let's call these, for the sake of this talk, we're going to call them Australibius, without getting into all the crazy nomenclature. So there was Australibius appii, and there was Australibius or Megalibius walterstorffii. And it was interesting because you get all the melanitania up in here. Up in here, you would get all the appii, and out in here, whoopsie, and in the deeper parts, you would get the walterstorffii. And for every 100 melanitania, there were 20 appii, and there was 3 or 4 walterstorffii. And the walterstorffii preyed on the appii, and the appii preyed on the melanitania. That was the other thing that was very interesting about the whole trip, was that we expected, I expected when we first got there, it would be pretty much a monotypic species per biotope. I mean, one species. I thought you went here, scooped a few Bellatii, you went here, scooped one. It wasn't the case. There's multiple species in a lot of different biotopes, and in some of those biotopes, like Canal Andreoni, there's 5 species in there, and you're scooping them up, and you're like, holy smokes. So anyway, there's 3 species here, and we were just beside ourselves. This is the melanitania we caught. This is a photo tank of the appii that were just collected. And all the fish we collected was amazing. I was sharing some stories with Steve a little bit earlier about his forays into Cameroon and stuff, and we both feel that a lot, besides bugs and worms, a lot of these native fishes prey on each other, obviously. And everything we pulled out, except one spot at one juncture, was big old fat and sassy. If these fish were allowed in our show, they would virtually win every time. These wild fish, they were just pretty spectacular. The other thing that's really interesting was there was a huge amount of variability, amongst the species, among each pond. So anyway, that's the appii. There's a little closer look at the appii. Pretty cool fish. And there's a young Walter Storfy. The Walter Storfy were intriguing because the males would be in the middle, females would be sort of on the perimeter of the deeper area, and the males would visit the females on the sides to spawn. This is
Are there any non-killies in there, or was it pure annual killies?
no. There are many biotopes, and I'll throw some
Oh,
other.
not this one.
Not this one, yeah.
Okay.
That have other species, and but they were typically and that's a great question because they were typically sites that were closer to whatever the major river was in that basin. And when that river went, there were places, for example, where I collected. Let's call it appii. I collected appii. Well, I'm scooping the appii, and here it's a little deeper, and the water was 42 degrees at that other site in Triantia Trace. But there's 2 or 3 beautiful Cory paleatus. There's Otocinclus. There's whiptail cats. They're all here. This gives you a good overview, if we will, of the drainage basin. You can sort of see the actual basin. This is on the road to Marin. It's a beautiful country. Uruguay really is. Very little crime, wonderful people. I still think it all has to do with mate, but that's okay. This is what the roads typically look like. All pretty serviceable. They're fairly well maintained. And this is your typical biotope. Little streams along the side. This was interesting. This was a much larger, obviously, biotope, and you can see that the water's fairly shallow. There's a little bit of a close-up, and these plants are pretty predominant. If you're seeing these plants and these clumps, you're pretty much going to see killies there. There was a few spots where I said, Palo Heber, let's pull over here. I figured, this was like kind of 4th or 5th or 6th day. I figured after all this, I was an Australorhynchus expert. So they pull over, I get out there, start scooping, and nothing. Well, they sort of inherently knew what was going to be there and what wasn't. So that map I showed earlier, there's certain locations, and there's 3 or 4 that are called Franco's Folly. So a little farther down the road, same basic biotope, and that's there to give you a little perspective in regard to how big and how small these biotopes can be. And this behind is the ubiquitous fence. There's cattle everywhere. So this fence is really important because you need to get to the other side of it. And you saw the gentlemen we traveled with, all wonderful people. Some maybe not quite as athletic as others, to be polite. So what happens is, in order to get to the other side, if you're a young, spunky guy like Heber, and I was able to do it, you've got these heavier poles here that are holding up. This is barbed wire. So you step on there, and then you straddle and go over to the other side. Now, if you're maybe a little rotund and having a little trouble getting over that, well, we spread those wires apart and you sort of work your way through. Then if it's later in the trip and maybe you're having a little bit of a rough time or getting a little tired, and well, we lift the wires up and you end up being what we call a belly slider. This was pretty cool. That site we saw earlier was Neone, Australorhynchus neone, which you really don't see in a hobby. Pretty cool fish. I remember years ago where I think I was doing a presentation or something like that. I had all these pictures of beautiful fish and, colors and spectacular. And there was a couple fish that maybe were not quite as spectacular. So I had a fish that sort of looked like this, and I remember this from years ago. It might not be great looking, but the term they used, it was morphologically intriguing. This is a slide from 35 years ago. I got this fish, Lenny McCoyak ended up getting this fish in 35 years ago, came to us with a belati. I can pretty much guarantee that 35 years ago, this belati wasn't belati, it was probably neone. So unbeknownst to us, we probably had a new species. And this is the appii that we also cover in cage. Typical room, not much to it. It was habitable. Nothing much to brag about. Beds were sort of short. There's a couple instances where I'm not a super tall guy, but I'd take a chair, pretty much like the ones you're sitting on, and put it at the end of bed so I'd have a place for my feet. There's a bed, I'm 6'2", and the beds were 5.5 foot. This is in B level. Somebody asked about the temperature. The temperature in this room that evening was 50 degrees. There's no heat. They have a little cupboard there that has a bunch of wool blankets, scratchy wool blankets. And I don't like scratchy wool blankets, but when it's 50 degrees, you learn to love scratchy wool blankets. This is a typical bathroom. The reason I popped this slide in was up here, you're seeing this trying to dry. Well, granted the water's not deep in most places, unless we're sailing a river or something, but it's very cold, like we talked about, and if you do slip, you have your chest waders fill up with water. And it's, trying to walk around with water, 50-degree water filled up in chest waders is not exactly, it's a little cumbersome. And that's Alan Johnson's shirt trying to dry off from such an event. This is one of those things where, everybody's traveled. And you all have those moments where you say, I'm not sure this makes sense. We're in the shower, and I'm in the shower. Get back there, you. In the shower, and I'm not sure why they have a 220-volt line plugged inside the shower. The other thing is if you want to, you travel with a group. If you want to stay friends, you take a short shower, because this little hot water tank, if you're at the end of that, you know you use too much, because if somebody comes out of the shower and they give it a hairy eyeball.
Did you run the electrocution coils over the, you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
I know exactly what you're talking about, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
That's what we had in Bolivia.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's been there. This was interesting. Now again, I'm showing you well, I'm actually going to have to speed this up a little bit because I've got a chat. I'm rambling on here. But this is a fort. This is one of the converted forts that was in Uruguay. Absolutely beautiful. And this is the second trip. So we end up, you saw the first trip. This is the second trip. Poster bed, our closet. It was gorgeous. So Pablo, our host, who set the whole thing up on the first and second trip, I said, Pablo, what the heck is going on here? We had those sort of rustic environment on the first one. Wow, this is idyllic. And I said, how come we stay on this one on the second trip instead of the first? And he goes, because you didn't ask. He was serious. I guess Lou turned around and said, hey, can we step up our accommodations a little? And he did. This was sort of interesting. I keep saying it, but it is true. There's a lot of interesting things there. This Parque Grau Rivera was a spot we went to collect. What was fascinating about this was I'm figuring this is a phenomenal park somewhere like, not necessarily Yosemite or whatever, but it's probably a state park or something that'd be really cool. So we get there, it's cold this morning. I mean, cold. I think it was maybe 37, 38 degrees, something like that. So we scamper out there, we get the mate, we park here, the van's there, the little trailer's behind, and I'm like, okay. Well, it turns out to be an amusement park. So that was really cool, but there's our van. We actually collected somewhere between the Ferris wheel and a roller coaster.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah. This is that motley crew, and this right here was the pond in Parque de Rivera. We actually had to crack a little bit of ice along the edges. So so much for tropical fish, right? And this is what we caught there. Another FBI type. And a fish that was, they called at that juncture CXCL004, which, probably Wanlangi or Phosphorana.
Yeah. P. Harper commented about that. Collecting the fish, and you basically are chipping ice to collect.
Absolutely, I was there.
Yeah.
Another interesting biotope. But what's interesting about this one, of course, we got the ubiquitous fest. The trees, not a lot of trees in Uruguay. What this is, these are eucalyptus trees that were brought into Uruguay because their indigenous trees are virtually non-existent. So they needed building materials, they need firewood, et cetera, et cetera. So you see these stands of eucalyptus all over the place that are planted so that they have access to timber. That's an indigenous Uruguayan tree. That's one of the few we spotted. Another typical site. Again, the other side of the fence. And in this one, we found niggerheaded species of fence. Pretty cool stuff. This, at the end of our first leg of the trip, is Heber's place. Heber has his home, and right next to it here is a spot that we call the aquarium. So he actually retired from professional soccer and opened basically a small aquarium store to help subsidize his income. And again, without getting into all the details, we were there. The economy was pretty rough in Uruguay. I think American dollar was worth about 25 pesos, and you could buy a great big whole dinner for $1.50. Pablo was an instructor at the university, and I think that year he made $3,800. It was that 3,800 US dollars. It was that tough. So they needed to subsidize what they were doing. So this is actually inside the aquarium. We've got all these little buckets, and a lot of these buckets were de leche, caramel. So all I can think is these guys must all have diabetes or something, going through all these containers after containers of caramel. And this is my patch. Everybody had their own little patch in the aquarium. And you can see some some smaller fish, some bigger fish, etc. These are probably Walter Storfy, these are probably Melamitania. So each site, what they would do is right here, you see a little bit of masking tape. You would collect the fish, they'd label it, they put it in a pop bottle, and when you get back to the aquarium, they turn around on top of these and maintain them for you. So, there's 5 of us on a trip. So, Lee, myself, Lou, Corinne, and all had our own little patch here. This is after the first leg. This is Heber, 2 young ladies, and the youngster. And what happened was when we were out there, we were collecting, these girls were phenomenal. They kept up on the fish. If the water got too cloudy, if fish died, they would do water changes. So, Heber's not around, he's the guy that does it. Well, both of them were phenomenal. But we knew that we'd be in really good shape because Superman was backing us still. Second leg of the trip, we're going west. This intrigued me. Now, fascinating to see a little side marker. No, but it was interesting for me because a lot of the species we would get from Uruguay were Route 9, kilometer 205. So they'd be on a road, boom, boom. So this is exactly what happened. There's a kilometer marker. I always wondered what they were, and all along the road are these kilometer markers. So if they said it was Route 9, kilometer 205, if you went to Route 9, kilometer 205 in Uruguay right now, within a kilometer, you'd find out, you'd find exactly what you're looking
Yeah,
at.
but Niagara Peninsula was kilometer 101 or kilometer 99
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of my favorite fish, we'll see it in a little bit, was a Route 9, kilometer 205. That's why I keep bringing it up. You would ask about other fish?
Yes.
Yeah. So, this is River Yee, and what happened, we seine part of that, and we did get some cichlids, etc., some other fishes. The second trip, I've got 300 slides, 350 slides, and probably 100, 150 of those slides are cichlids and characins. Any light bearer people here? Okay, with Genesia, tons of Genesia and some of the some pretty cool
Did you get
stuff.
Lanka or another one?
We actually got 2,
Okay.
but they were very delicate. They did not travel well. This was interesting because I've always been a bit of an aquarist and even like plants, a bit of an aficionado, and most of the sword plants going around in the hobby are Echinodoros uruguayensis. So this is the Echinodoros uruguayensis in the emergent form.
Jim and GFA.
Yeah, he knows his fish. And so these are the ones popping up in the Rio, Uruguay, Amazon sword plants, even though it's not the Amazon. There you go. So there's some, Gentogephagus meridionalis, we've got some, what's that, pike cichlid, we've got a Caricidium, some cichlids, that's just a little scoop up.
That's a big city.
Yeah, there's some big ones. We had talked about the drainage basins and the flooding and how things happen in Uruguay. And this is a good indication of exactly how deep things can go. This whole area would be flooded, and you'd get all those little borrow pits, etc., that you'd find the Australorhynchus in as a result of the drainage basin flooding. This one intrigued me. This is one of my favorite little groups of slides, and only because I like annual fish and I'm a geek. We got pulled up to this site. Obviously, you see the van, and what ended up happening, this was acres and acres, but it was dry. There was nothing more. So I'm like, what? Pablo says, let's go. No fish. I said, no. I said, I want to check this out. So what ends up happening is they're all standing there wondering what this crazy guy is doing, scampering through these dry fields. That crazy guy was me. So I get out there and I start snapping a couple pictures. And this is the dry bed of the actual biotop, way out there, some acres. And I asked Pablo, how many fish would be here? He goes, Dave, there'd be millions. This is one of the largest sites of Australorhynchus in all of Uruguay. So you can see the dried up snail, dried grass, etc. And that's what the soil looks like. So that's where they're laying the eggs. And I'm like, doesn't look like damn peat moss to me. So I grabbed a handful, and it actually does sort of feel like damn peat moss. It's that consistency. It's a little bit sandier, but pretty fascinating. And no, I couldn't take it back because I didn't want to take a chance on our shipments getting confiscated by Fish and Wildlife bringing soils back. That's a big no-no.
Did you see any eggs when you picked
What?
up the dirt?
What's that?
Did you see any eggs when you picked up the dirt?
Truthfully, I actually did. I actually saw a couple, but I had to pick up about 20 handfuls of dirt to see one or two eggs. So I think they're selective about where they land. Another site, cows. And this is Australorhynchus cineris. Very small, limited distribution, very small biotop. This is a tough one. I'm not sure. Sometimes I don't know really what to think about this. Remember Australorhynchus alexandri? The one I'm going there for, the Holy Grail, waited 40 years, 3 marriages later. No, I was married. Anyway, so we pull up, and I'm like, I'm excited. We're ready, finally, after third, fourth day, gonna get this Australorhynchus alexandri. So we stop in the middle of San Javier in this town. And I'm like, okay, Pablo, when are we gonna get these alexandri? He says, David, we're here. I said, what do you mean we're here? We're in the middle of a town. Well, it turns out you've got this somewhat ramshackle shack here. We're parked right out in front. This is the group getting ready to collect. I'm like, okay. He says this is where they are. Boom. We walk around to the back of the house, and this is a pound in the back of the guy's house. But there's a few empty pop bottles. There's some trash. There's, I had sort of I like vision. I was sort of waiting for the birds to chirp and the sun to shine and the soft harp music playing in the background. It was like, what the heck? It's almost like, getting a date with the prom queen and finding out she's a lousy kisser or something, That's my analogy. I like it, but anyway. So yeah, that was it. But this is the biotop. Pretty typical. But there we go. Boom. Alexandri. That was the first scoop. So it was just unbelievable. It was great to, after 40 years, to finally find that thing you're looking for. And there's a picture of the fish from the biotop. Somebody had asked about temperature, notes, etc. This is my logbook. Penmanship might not be great, but it works for me. So what happens is, each site I would write down where we are, drainage basin, Keeley fry, probably this, probably that, seasonal pond that did this last year. All the little details. It's amazing how much you can squeeze in a little spot like this. You had asked about temperatures, there we go, hardness was 25, alkalinity was 60, nitrates, temperature, blah, blah, blah. But the one thing that I got really lucky with is in this, I put all the GPS locations down. And the reason I'm saying I got really lucky was a couple of years after I won, I pulled my GPS and it crashed. Couldn't get it to work. I sent it to Garmin, they couldn't get it to work. So I had lost many, many, many locations that I would never find again. So I said, well, wait a minute. I think I might, in a moment of lucidity, actually wrote those in my logbook, and I did. So right before I put this presentation together, or while I was, and again, this is, I gotta be honest, you guys are way ahead of me in terms of, I'm sure, ability to pop things together and computer knowledge, etc. At 68 years old, I had to teach myself how to use PowerPoint for the first time.
You did well.
Okay, back to. So anyway, so we got this stuff, and I'm like, maybe these guys, Alexandri, I really like that fish. I'm going to go see what's going on. So, boom, I go to Google Maps, and look at this, San Javier, July 2009. And it's right there. There's the Ramshackle Shack. The Ramshackle Shack, we parked right there, we scampered around the fence, and there is the Alexandrite biotope. Pretty cool. Boom, and that was July, so there's supposed to be fish there. Now, we're in March 2013, no water. Oops, no oops, because it's a dry season. This is, early in the year, so all dry. Now we're in August 2016. Life is good. I cleaned up the shack a little bit, and we got water, we got fish. 2019, no water, dry season, same old, we're good. September 2019, water, but wait a minute. It's just, the pond's much smaller now, so we're a little concerned about that. San Javier, July 2021. Uh-oh, new road, houses being built just south. So if you take a look here, this road wasn't there before. Now there's a road. And you've got this biotope here, which is dry. No water. March 2024, earlier this year, and look at all the houses built. There's nothing here before, there was no road, and this is dry. So, I don't know, don't know what the...
Are they on wells?
Yes. Yeah. So we don't know what the situation is, but there's a reason Ron asked why if they're on wells, because, you look at a water table feeding all these homes, and maybe never see Alexandria there again. If I go back, that's one of the main things I'd like to go back for. Let's get this rolling. There's Lee. This is fairly interesting in that we talk about species and endangered species and limited biotopes and how we really need to preserve what we have. This is the biotope, for the only known biotope for Australibia cineris. That's it. We collected there, but we put all the fish back. We snapped a couple pictures, and but Keeber was very protective of it, and justifiably so, because there's literally a few fish, they're big fish, and really concerned about it. I had actually thought, again, our dollar was fairly strong. I had actually said, what might make sense is, what if I bought this area? And I asked Keeber, how much would it cost? He goes, you'd probably buy it for $500-600 an acre. So, maybe I should have just bought a few acres here, protect this site. But how do you do that when you're up here, I wasn't, they said the dynamics of Americans buying property in Uruguay. Uruguay can get a little complicated. And this is a fish from there. Really pretty scenarios. Love this place, Colonia, one of the old towns. Again, Spanish were here, and old Spanish town, cobblestone creek, and cobblestone streets. Just a really idyllic little setup. And the cars you see here, etc. Those aren't antiques. We're not Mark Lavity's a big car guy. Mark, this is not a car show. These were daily drivers for these guys, and they really maintained them. They were expert mechanics, and really, money's precious there, and what they have, they just make do. This was pretty interesting. This is Colonia. And what was interesting about that site is that site was stereotypical for Australorhynchus nigripinus. That site's still there. That's where Australorhynchus nigripinus was first found and described from this site. Next leg of the trip, third leg of the trip, we're heading east now. This group, obviously, Heber, Jorge, Pablo, they got sort of a smirky look. And I wasn't sure what was going on when I snapped this picture. Usually, they're busy, etc. And in particular, for whatever, Pablo, who's the one that spoke English very well and was our translator, says, "Oh, okay, David, you go first." I said, "Okay." He goes, "Just watch out for the characucha." I thought it was characucha. I'm like, whatever. I know there's no poisonous snakes. There's no really bad issues there. So I just don my stuff. I jump in. Boom. End up getting in there. Only collected a couple things. Only little tiny fry, little tiny nigripinus in there. So I'm in there, and Pablo starts laughing a little bit. So I get out, and all of a sudden, I'm bleeding from 4 or 5 different places. I said, "Pablo, what's up? What the heck's characucha?" He goes, "There's a reason they call it sawgrass, David." This is interesting, very interesting to me. One of my second favorite, bordered on one of my favorite fish in regard to Alexandri. We talked earlier on about Route 9, kilometer 205. This is another one of those sites which, no, the birds weren't chirping, nobody in the background was playing a harp, the sun wasn't shining, etc., etc. I expected something a little more idyllic. This was a little ditch alongside the road, as you can see right here, that was right down the street from a slaughterhouse. Not a good thing to be a cow in Uruguay. This is the group. We were going to all collect there. We didn't need to. I went in and collected because you didn't need everybody to collect. The fish were so plentiful. One scoop, you'd get 20, 30 fish. It was getting toward the end of the season. And Lou was sort of fun. Lou would get a little tired at the end of toward the end of the day, and he'd turn around and say, he'd sort of sit in the back, and we'd be at a biotop, and I was pretty spunky. So he'd go, "Dave." So I'd scamper over. He'd go, "Get me 2 Paraludio flammulatus, would you?" So I won't bring him back to Ludio flammulatus, but he was a great guy, great company. All these guys were phenomenal. We couldn't ask for a greater group to travel with. This is it. This is the ditch. But from the ditch, we got a scoop of fish. And if you 5 little buckets, those little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So obviously, Heber is spreading the fish out amongst us after the ones I collected. And this is a little close up of the fish. That was one scoop. All these Australorhynchus that were just collected in the wild. One of my favorites. Australorhynchus ludoflammulatus, Route 9, kilometer 205. Just a really special fish. And that was very important to me because that was the second fish I ever got from Eduardo. That was a little unusual.
Did you take any of these fish home?
I took all of them.
You did?
What I would do is I took fish from many of the sites. But what you had to, you never knew what you were going to collect where. So in the beginning of the trip, you would collect, let's say, the first one. You got API, you got Melanitania, you got Walter Storefront. Well, you grab those. Well, in the next site, if there's API, Melanitania, Walter Storefront, I didn't duplicate it unless there was a lot of variability, or if there was something a little different about it. But I pretty much took every species home except, obviously, not Cineris. Cheirodophilus were a little too big for me. Prognathus we collected, which is a big, nasty looking, well, actually, it's not nasty. What was the term? Morphologically intriguing, I think we used.
Gas mouth.
Yeah.
Well, that last fish, I've never heard of it or seen it before.
Oh, it's a thing.
Well,
That's gorgeous.
Yeah, there's some great stuff. Yeah, and again, I'm hearing stories about other people collecting, cooties and shots and liver flukes, and this couldn't have been any easier. I'm sorry.
Ludio flammulatus in Greek and Latin means
Yep,
yellow flame,
exactly.
but it's white.
Well,
Are there other populations that are more yellow? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But the reason I put these slides in is so it was for effect. There's a better contrast between the white and the black. the ones you're talking about, Ludio flamellatus or yellow flame, they're yellower, but the bars in between are more faded.
Okay.
So you're 100% correct, and I think we'll see a slide of one of those a little farther down. This was an interesting site. This was a site of Chiriodophilus, and this is one of the few that was an atypical biotope. You can see the net here to give you sort of a sense. You know, fallen logs, eucalyptus trees, dark, shaded, etc. This was very atypical. But it was interesting. Yeah, really tough to catch these little buggers in there. You know, you had a lot of debris in there, and your nets get all banged up. And this is a net I brought down with me. I didn't put a picture on. Maybe I should have. That net lasted for 9.5 days. It was like it's like it had a life because it broke halfway through the last day, and Jorge was a bit of a jokester. And the last day, he comes back. He goes, "David, I have your net." And I look, and he's got just a handle of a net with a cow skeleton, or head of a cow on top of it. Right. But this is the fisherman's site, the Chiriodophilus. You know, we've had prettier fish, but it had a personality. This was interesting. This was a site that was supposed to have a bunch of different Australorhynchus in. We scooped and scooped and scooped and scooped, and I never got anything. But while I'm down here scooping, remember I mentioned how Lou would sometimes direct me to grab him a couple pair of fish. So Lou's up on top of the bridge here, and while he's up here supervising, a gentleman pulls up, a well-heeled gentleman, and you know, we don't see a lot of people when we're out and about. The only thing you usually see is you see a lot of rancheros, guys on horses, you know, traveling back and forth, herding, you know, cows and things like that. So I'm down here scooping fish, the gentleman pulls up, Lou's talking to the gentleman up there, and, you know, nice guy, dressed nicely, and I have no idea what's going on. So chat, the guy's going like this, Lou's going like this. Okay. So I get up there, and I get introduced, whatever, and let's say his name was Jose, and Lou goes off and starts talking to him again. And the guy's like this, and he goes like this, and finally, he starts to walk away toward his car. And I said, "Lou, what the heck's going on? Are we good?" He goes, "Yeah, we're good. He goes, he's a nice gentleman, stop by to see what we're doing." And I told him we're collecting little tropical fish. He goes, "Little tropical toy fish?" And Lou goes, "Yeah, we're collecting them. We do, you know, collect them. It's a hobby. We do research." And the guy's like, "Yeah, no, you're not." And I'm like, "Lou, what are you talking about?" He goes, "No." He goes, "No, you're not." He goes, "You've got thousands of dollars worth of camera equipment. You've got GPS recorders. You guys have nice watches. You're all well-heeled. You're CIA." I said, "Look." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "David." I said, "Well, why is he going like this?" He goes, "I kept telling him, no, we're not CIA." And he was like, I said, "Well, he seems happy. What's up?" He goes, "Well, after a while, he came up to me, and I said, because I sort of nudged him, and I whispered to him, 'We're CIA.'" He went happily on his way, came back, and this, God's honest truth, came back, and he invited us all to go to dinner. Lou's like, "Yeah, I don't think we can." The guy goes, "Oh, come on, I'd like to take you to dinner." And he goes, "Oh, you know, we have an agenda." So Lou goes, "Oh, we can't. The government doesn't like to see that many CIA members all together." So in that site, there's some cichlids around. We collected some cichlids. You know, and you know how sometimes when you're in a van and you're traveling and we're going hour after hour after hour after hour, we're singing along. Your mind wanders. So, you know, one of these trips, I'm thinking, let's see, we're going to get some cichlids. You know, I wasn't sure if we were going to find a new killifish because I knew most of those. A lot of the cichlids I didn't know. So I'm thinking, well, what would happen if we're singing along and we collect a new cichlid? You know, would we be able to name it? I'm thinking, yeah, might be able to do something like that. So what would you name it? Well, I mean, again, your mind wanders. So what happens is I'm thinking, there's some guys in the AKA that have done a ton of work as far as trying to get other people to embrace our hobby, you know. Some of these guys have done talks that I've been to that are like, you know, have some interesting, and one person in particular that has some interesting talks where I think the talk was maybe entitled, you know, get killies, get rid of cichlids and other dumb fish. I think there was another talk that was something like increase your IQ 20 points immediately, get killies, dump cichlids. So anyway, so I'm thinking, well, that might be cool. We'll name him after this guy. So I think next time this guy's doing a presentation at one of these big cichlid and or killifish things, like, you know, we're in cahoots now with the ACA, right, for the conventions.
Sort of.
Yeah, sort of, right? So he's up there doing a presentation. I could see it now. Gets done with the presentation, question and answer period. The guy in the back goes, you know, and he's talking about get rid of cichlids, get killies, and the guy in the back is raising his hand. Yes, what's your question? Well, wait a minute. Aren't you the guy that has a cichlid named after you? Isn't it Cyclosoma Dave Hemmerleini? I could just see Dave. I didn't do it. It wasn't me. All right, enough of that foolishness. But your mind does wander. This
Little bias.
yeah, this is the reason there weren't any fish in that, any Australians in that. Yeah. This, what's it called? Wolffish?
Yeah,
Yeah. Hoptius malabaricus or something? Yeah.
or one of the others.
Yeah, exactly. Big old nasty dentition and pretty much gobbled up everything there. Somebody made fun of me once saying wolffish. I guess I can't pronounce wolf the right way. What is it?
Wolf.
Yeah, that's what they said.
They're edible.
Yeah. Wolf. Wolf. Well, anyways, today it's wolf. It's my talk, and I'm liberal. This is from just down the road. This is another collection. And what again, I could go on. We've looked at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 locations. We could do that forever, but we do have a bit of a limited time here. So I popped in some pictures or images of fish from various other locations, just to give you a sense of what's out there without showing you a lot of little ponds and things like that. That's another Appiite type. Actually, this is one langi. This one is another really great fish. This was from Salamanca's Gymnogeophagus. I'm sorry, not Gymnogeophagus, Australepius gymnoventris.
There's tadpoles.
Yeah, tadpoles.
Yeah, tadpoles. Yeah. And somebody asked about Luteoflagellatus, a little different. Here you go, Ron. Yeah, little different flavor, a little different color. The color of the water sort of dissipates
It's
the
a
yellow.
man thing too.
Yeah.
Very different width.
Yeah. A little different critter, but same answer to your question, I
Yeah,
guess.
it does. I bet they're two species.
Yeah, this place was cool for a couple reasons. We've been on the road for a long time, traveling all over, pretty much eating, you know, a little bit for breakfast, empanadas for lunch, Parisian for dinner, and I loved it. I could have done it every day. There's a couple other guys that were looking for something a little different, in particular Dave Coran, who Dave can probably eat pizza for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, and midnight snacks. The guy loves pizza. So what happened, we pulled up, he was ecstatic. There's a pizza place here. And this is a little Italian restaurant. Well, it turns out that Italian restaurant also served pizza. So we got in there first. I ordered the Parisia. Heber always ordered the same thing. And the translation from Uruguay is old cow. So what it basically was a really rough-looking piece of meat that was beat up to be a little more tender, deep fried, had an egg on it. That's what he ate. And Dave Coran ordered a pizza. Well, they brought this pizza out. It's a good-looking pie. And Dave's ecstatic, you know, you could tell. So we're sitting there, we just started eating, and Dave's food arrived just a few minutes after ours. And there was a young girl that was, you know, at the front here. She had walked in and was walking around. And I'm like, okay, she's sort of looking. Figured, she's looking at the food probably to get an idea what to order. So she sort of circles around, and boom, like that, she grabs Dave's pizza and ran out the door. Honest to God. Fouled by the manager of the place. I wish, you know, it's one of those things. I was the other end of the table, and I wish to hell I could have got a picture of Dave's face when I picked that pizza. This is the closest I could come. This was actually at the zoo in Uruguay, but I don't know. We know, Dave. Didn't this sort of seem appropriate? All right. Fun town. This side of the street, Brazil. This side of the street, Uruguay. Your border is right here. You can run back and forth different countries all day long. What was really interesting about this too was we collected a pond that was just down the road. And this country border bisected that pond, literally bisected that pond. Now, we're not going to get into the whole Brazil thing here, right? But we know some people have strong feelings about that in the Brazilian fish and our inability to keep some of those. So we did not necessarily know about the big issues now with the Brazil fish, but at that juncture we didn't have permits. You know, we had permits to collect in Uruguay. We didn't have any permits to collect in Brazil. So we, you want to do what you need to do so that you don't get spanked. So I'm collecting at that pond, and I'm like, Pablo. So you're telling me that over here where we are, this is Uruguay? He goes, yeah, David. I said, and right over here, when I go over here, we're in Brazil. He goes, yeah. I said, but we can collect Uruguayan fish, yeah, but we can't collect Brazilian fish, even though they're in the same pond, yeah. So I said, what do they have, dual citizenship? I have no idea. But I said, well, so that we don't cause any problems, what happens if those Brazilian fish end up on the Uruguayan side? He goes, they're Uruguayan fish. So I scampered around to the Brazilian side and chased all the fish over the Uruguay side. I really did. This, I put in particularly, just for one reason, for a good friend of mine, that I want to let somebody know, should he ever make it to Uruguay, that there'd be something for him to do, Mr. Gazier, who on occasion likes a game of chance. And this was on the Uruguay side, so, and just think, Jim, right now, and again, I looked this up just for you.
Cut the talk short, and I'm on my way.
Well, here's the good news. $1 US, right now, 42 Uruguayan pesos.
Oh.
Yeah, so you'd be in good shape. Beautiful stuff in Uruguay, there is. I mean, I have 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 slides, not because I'm good at taking pictures or any of that kind of stuff. It's just that Uruguay was that beautiful of a country, it really was. And the people are wonderful. You couldn't ask for a better place. There's a reason there's a lot of expats down there. Your dollar goes a long way, it's safe, the medical system is phenomenal. It really is. If it wasn't, 12, 14-hour plane ride, I'd frequent a little more often. But this is seaside, and there's a beautiful, beautiful lighthouse, etc., etc. This was, whoopsie, I'm too far. This was fascinating. There's a, what's that? Oh, I'm sorry.
I said it looked like a dino skeleton, but that was the next
I
photo.
thought somebody recognized this picture. What it actually is, there's one of the famous artists in Uruguay built this, and it's a seaside home here, and he's sort of perceived as the Bill Gates of Uruguay, if you will. He's done very well.
It looks Muslim.
Yeah, no.
Just
It does. The peaks do. Yeah. But it was a phenomenal architecture. This is in Punta del Sol, just a fascinating bridge. Intentionally made a curvy bridge. This one got me. Remember, your mind tends to wander. So I'm zinging along in the van, and I'm getting a little, going here, going there, and I wasn't sure if it was the mate or I was tired, but to me, I was half asleep. It looked like the shrubs were moving. And I looked, and I'm like, what the hell's that? Whoops. They were rheas. Pretty cool. I'm not sure if I should have put this slide in, but I did. So we're going to live with it. This is the second trip. This is a good friend of mine that went on a second trip, John Van Renfrew from Canada. What happened was we're at a biological station here. So we're at the biology station. We're taking a peek. The biologist was wonderful. The manager. They've got some really cool projects going out there. They've been breeding some fish for sustenance, for the food, for the country, etc. They were also doing some research. Well, we got there early in the day, and there's a lot of, Uruguay, there's always critters running around. There's sheep over here, there's cows over here, there's lamb over here, there's chickens and roosters. And so we're sitting at a table sort of planning a trip where we're going to go. The manager of the facility is there. And John gets a little bored. He makes friends with this little lamb. And I think he named the lamb Bambi. So we go out, we collect, bing, bing, bing. We're doing all this stuff, and we finally get back. It's dusk. We're sitting at the table. We're tired. They got a lantern on the table, and John, there's a chicken. There's this sheep. Blah blah blah. John's like, "Where's Bambi?" And he goes, the manager of the biology station says, "Bambi? I don't understand. What's Bambi?" And Pablo translates, "What Bambi? The lamb." And he just sort of smiles. He goes, "Oh, Bambi. Bambi's going to taste very good." That's what John looked like when he found out his adoptive pet Bambi was down. This is not a pool. Well, it is a pool, but this is a hot spring. And I'm like, what the heck? We stayed in these nice, this is the second trip now. We stayed in these beautiful cabanas. This is a hot spring. And it's a real cool hot spring. So, there was a picture I pulled of me sitting in the hot spring. I didn't want to offend anybody. So I had, what do they used to call it when you're all white and your arms, a farmer's tan? That was an Australorhynchus tan. But we've got this beautiful place. I'm hanging out in the pool, got nice food, everything's copacetic, life is peachy. This is more where I expected to find the Alexandrite. But anyway, I asked Pablo, I said, "Pablo, this is phenomenal. How come we didn't do this first trip?" And Pablo said, "You didn't ask." I said, "Okay." Whoops. This is a typical asado, typical meal. You get what I politely refer to as cow parts, because not a lot of good parts of a cow stay in Uruguay. You get maybe and the tougher parts, they put a little bacon on top, I think thinking that maybe that'll help it. And we ate stuff, and I'm not trying to be crude, right? Because it's just, they're used to different things than we are. Same thing when I was in Asia. I was eating, these chick eggs that were almost all foreign, cartilage. Just do, in Rome, do as the Romans do. As long as you're pretty sure it's not going to kill you. But we ended up, eating this parisha, and then this came out, and this is the second trip. Now, the first trip, I never saw a vegetable. I didn't know vegetables were in Uruguay. So this, I swear, is every vegetable that was in all of Uruguay. They went and cooked it up, and they served this. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This is phenomenal. So I asked Pablo. I said, "Pablo, how come we didn't get this on the first trip?" And Pablo said,
You guys catch on pretty quick.
here we go. I'm starting to wind it up. This is back at the aquarium. The van. The trailer backed up, unloading it. It's getting time to head home. This is actually the aquarium. This is the back of Heber's facility where he actually sells tropical fish. Some of these were platies and swordtails and regular tropical fish. Sort of interesting. This is outside in an alleyway just outside his home, and what this is these are all killifish that are being raised in these little styrofoam boxes. These tanks are set up with spawning material in, with all the Australorhynchus, and this is at the point in time when he was selling the eggs. So, you'd order whatever eggs he'd ship them. I'm not sure what happened. I felt bad for Heber because he really did try. He was doing a great job, but, you'd order, 2 or 3 little satchels of eggs. He'd send them. Nobody really had luck with them. And I'm not sure what he was missing, whether he didn't keep them long enough or... I don't know. I don't have an answer. I wish I did, because I would have liked to have helped
Did he
him.
have the entire tank covered in peat on the bottom, or did he have containers?
He had the tank covered on the bottom.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah. So and that's what we thought. But you can offer some advice. But he was a gentleman and a wonderful guy. But sometimes people just have their own agendas. And, I think he thought that was the way it should have been done. So, but anyway, and even I felt bad. Even Lee Harper. Lee would pay for his AK membership each year, and in return, he would send him a bunch of eggs, and we rarely, unfortunately, got too much out of it. But anyway, so, each of these different species collecting the eggs, et cetera, and this is also in his backyard. Here we're getting ready to leave. They're preparing our goodbye meal, and again, the grill out in Uruguay is called a parisha. The meal itself is called the asado. You got the eucalyptus wood getting ready to rock and roll. You got some sausage here. You got the French baguettes, and there's a bag of cow tarts. And then right here, everybody should have a couple fish tanks right next to their grill. This is it, ready to rock and roll. Look, tons of fish. You sort them out. You put them together. You bag them up. We were there literally all day bagging fish. Just unbelievable, and documenting it all. This is my stack here. Lee was fairly conservative. Lou took a few more. Alan, I got this little batch here because I know you got to be realistic on collecting. You really do have a bit of a moral and ethical obligation to take care of this stuff, and I knew I had limited amount of time. And Dave went bonkers. So we were literally bagging all day. This is it, rock and roll. It was my fish bag. That's the journal I was talking about. And that's the goodbye meal. That's Jorge cooking us up our little asado. There's the box. Back in the U.S., inspected all my fish. And this is the bank of tanks at my warehouse. When I was introduced, they talked about the wholesaling companies. I'm a psychologist that branched off into a little bit of a business with tropical fish that sort of took off. And after practicing psychology for quite some years, I figured I'd take 1 year off of the psychology end and just work in the tropical fish wholesale business. We were importing a lot of fish from Asia, and et cetera, et cetera. And we have a lot of accounts in New York, et cetera. But after taking that year off, I never went back to the psychology. It became financially viable. And for the last 30 so years or whatever, I've wholesaled tropical fish. So this is at my warehouse, and I had 30 tanks all set up, all here. And these are all the labels from the collected fish, 10-gallon tanks, and peat moss in all the tanks, ready to breed, ready to rock and roll. If I ever do get back, and I hope I do, and because again, a lot of those guys that I traveled with were a lot older than me at that juncture, and I'm still younger than they were when they went, so I think there's hope. This is one of the fish I'd like to go get. I've never seen it. This was from eggs from fish I had gotten from Eduardo Susena. It's a black Baladia. But I'll promise you, it's probably not a Baladia. I pretty much guarantee it's probably it's a new species. I know where that fish is, or I know where that fish was. Yeah, so I'd like to go back and get that. I'd also like to go back and get a Lulio flagellaris that we saw. I'd also like to go back and see what the status. Yeah, I'd like to go back and see what the status of that Alexander is. I'm dying to get back to San Javier and see, is that there? And if it is, collect it and bring it back. So I wouldn't bring a lot back. I'd just bring 2 or 3 species, maybe 4. This was interesting. This is sort of just, I don't know, I looked at this line and it reminds me of Uruguay. Everybody's nice, they're kind, they just go with it. These are a couple of youngsters. They pulled up on the horse. The horse is just hanging out. They dismounted from the horse, and they're just sitting there watching us collect. Well, then we moved down, a couple hundred yards or a mile or whatever to collect again. They rolled up and just sat there and watched us collect. So they seemed very interested. So my hope is that, this was some years ago, my hope is that maybe these youngsters got a little bit of interest in some of their native fishes, the Australibias, and maybe on this next trip I'm talking about going on, maybe these are the guys that are going to take me around and show me where to go. So let's hope that happens. So thanks so much, I appreciate it. Any questions?
I was in Bolivia twice in the early 2000s, and we were not able to find any government agency that regulated ornamental fish, and we had to just go and I actually wrote a letter in Spanish and faked it in case I was asked, did you actually have an agency?
Yeah, well, we did not, and I didn't put all that in here, but I do have slides of it. Oh, that's the other thing. If anybody else wants to see more pictures or slides, I've got the thumb drive here with that second trip.
Okay.
You're free to scroll through and look at all the slides of all those fish.
What year was your second trip?
2008.
About the same time,
Yeah.
okay.
So what,
So who got your permits?
well, that's what I was just gonna say. So what I have pictures of all those. I didn't wanna put all that stuff in there. But we had three different types of permits. We got the permit for Fish and Wildlife to
Right.
bring back in. Then we had a permit from the Department of the Interior to be able to travel and collect. And the third one was DINARA, D-I-N-A-R-A, which allowed us to collect those fishes. But what was interesting is that we had to list whatever fish we were gonna collect on there. So we guessed, and then some of these fish we got weren't described and things like that, so God only knows what, we had CXCL or X species.
Do you know if there's any commercial exportation of tropical fish from Uruguay?
There was. Now, I'm not sure what the current status was. There was a company in Florida who, that ended up actually importing, mostly the gymnasium fakers for a bit. But what he ended up doing was he turned around, actually traveled to Uruguay and spent a couple weeks with the Sigley group, legally brought the fish back, and was breeding them at his Florida fish farm. The hiccup with that was, like most of the Australorhynchus, people have had limited luck with the Australorhynchus. I've been reasonably successful. Not that I'm smarter than anybody else. I think I just recognize that they need a cool down period. And I also made friends with a binocular dissecting microscope when they hatched them. So I hatched the eggs when they're ready to be hatched. But in regard to the Gymnogeophagus, he brought him up here, and he didn't do great. He did okay with him for a couple generations, and then didn't do great because he wasn't able to get
Pull them down.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Spencer Jack?
what's that?
Spencer Jack, is that the person who...
No, it was, and I'm just blanking on it. Does anybody here get to the Northern Ohio cichlid event? No? Okay. Yeah, I'll remember his name in a minute, but anyway, he does have a facility down there, and Jeff something, but anyway, he was breeding him, so no, it's not that individual. Any other questions? Yeah.
Besides Nigropenis, where can people buy these fish in the U.S.? Do you have enough to distribute or share, or do you know of anybody who is selling them?
Well, again, the caveat is at this juncture is that, I would love to have Alexander. You saw me collected it, et cetera. I can't have that fish right now. Because if you look at, I can have it, but I'm pretty darn sure if somebody knocks at my door, I better have some documentation where it came from. So if you were to buy it nationally, internationally now, and it's just Australorhynchus alexandri, I don't know how, Fish and Wildlife or the Brazilian consulate, et cetera, would deal with it. But, it is on the red list for Brazil. And, whether it's the Ludio flammulatus or the reason Nigropenis is prevalent, that's not in Brazil. And we can have that. So, it's a real conundrum, if you will. I wish I could go back there and chase all those Brazilian fish back to the Uruguayan side, like I did, but, not going to be the case. There's a reason there's no South American price. Good? All right, well, thanks so much for joining me on that journey. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you ever get a chance to visit Uruguay, take me with you.